Welcome to this section of the Women in IoT conference. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jessie Nixon. I'm with Paratus People. I'm a IoT specialist, and I help connect different experts in the industry with their kind of IoT passions and help them realize their potential, which is an incredibly rewarding position to be in. And I love to champion diversity in the sector as well, which I think safe to say everybody here does. So I'm really excited to be presenting this panel today. So we are joined by Tejumade Afonja and Aishatu who are both industry experts. We've got Tejumade is the founder of AI Saturdays Lagos, and Aishatu is a renowned Peace Technologist. So very exciting to hear what they have to say today. So let's introduce them without further ado. So Tejumade, if you could kick things off by just giving us an overview of what you do and what you're up to.
Hi everyone, I'm Tejumade Afonja, and I am the co-founder of AI Saturdays Lagos. There I teach machine learning. We also have been organizing this for 4 years, and we help Nigerian youths who are interested in transitioning into the machine learning field or research stay up to date through our lessons. And I'm also a researcher. I work at CISPR currently doing research in generative modeling, security, privacy, amongst other things that I am involved in.
Thank you so much. And Aishatu, you next. Tell us what you're up to. Tell us about you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this panel. My name is Aishatu, and I'm a Peace Technologist, an AI artist and public speaker, advocating for social justice within technology. And I'm on the top list of 100 top brilliant women of AI ethics 2022. You can also find me on the list of Data Ethics for All top 100 champions for diversity and in technology. And I'm also the winner of the inaugural Ethics for Next Generation of AI Hackathon. And I'm a creative diasporian of African descent who tries to weave real-world issues into technological promises for a better future. And I want to ensure that complex social systems have spaces to develop their own structures. And I explore in particular African and Indigenous philosophies, mythology, folklore, or literature to design innovative, restorative, and equitable futures. And I do so as an AI artist by combining deep learning techniques, digital art, and painting into photography to explore issues of AI ethics. I'm also the regional coordinator for Africa and Europe of the organization Black Women in Artificial Intelligence. And we try to ensure that the voices of all intersectional identities of Black women are heard, and that women are empowered, educated, engaged, and embraced when it comes into being a part of the artificial intelligence sector. I'm also a steering committee member of an organization called Design to Divest, which is a Black-led transdisciplinary organization dedicated to celebrating communities at the margin by influencing the design industry to adopt and develop more equitable systems that include also different Afrocentric and Indigenous creative thought. So this is just in a nutshell to explain who I am. I wear many hats. And as a peace technologist, I also work on peace processes worldwide. At the moment, I work on a peace process in the Middle East with digital approaches with youth.
I mean, what an impressive roster of accolades and achievements, both of you. It's crazy, and it's so nice to have people like yourselves forefronting that push for diversity and equality. So I mean, hugely impressive. So I mean, without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty of quite a compelling topic that we're covering today. So we will be discussing the importance of research in IoT and how we can make research more accessible to everybody. I think this year we've all discovered the importance of research, whether it's pandemic related research or whether it's doing your own research. It's a hugely prevalent topic right now. So yeah, I mean, let's kick off by giving an introduction maybe into some emerging trends that we can identify in IoT in a sort of research related capacity. How do you guys feel?
Go first. First of all, IoT is very, very interesting and beaming with a lot of different applications now, say from smart cities to, smart cars. Everything is just smart environment. But for me, as a researcher in machine learning, what I find that very fascinating about this field would be edge computing. This idea of getting machine learning models on edge, tiny ML. So for example, NVIDIA has been championing this field for quite some time, having like tools for things like video analytics, conversational AI, but it's all pushing towards not just building bigger models, but how can we get these models on these tiny devices that we have? And I think those are very real, challenging problems that would be interesting to focus on for the next couple of years, getting machine learning models in production on the edge. Because it also has a lot of upside in terms of privacy, which is one of my research area where you don't want to have your data on the cloud. So you want to be able to make inference locally. So we need to have those tools in place. So those are the things I want to highlight, but certainly there's a lot more interesting trends coming up in this field.
Okay, and when you say more interesting trends, what kind of thing?
I was mute for a second. So I was going to say things like the interacting with sensors, like deep stream, quantization, or like for me, I always think about this from the having machine learning on the edge, having more technique in place to help us kind of like reduce the bandwidth. So you can also think about predicting like in manufacturing, for example. So like if you have a lot of footage coming up, so how do you make inference very, very fast? Like how you can use it for retailers, for example. So the robots are there, like we haven't even touched on those part where you have robots to do different kind of stuff that humans should probably not be doing, and some just to make life easier for humans. So there's a lot of ways in which IoT would benefit the future technologies that is already even benefiting, right? But but again, for me, I'm mostly excited about the field of edge computing.
I totally agree, and it's really nice as well to have that sort of positive spin on machine learning and AI, which is so often vilified in the media, and to kind of drill down into the details of how it can actually benefit, you know, different sectors of society. I'm with you. And Aishatu, what about you? I mean, what are some trends that you can identify in IoT?
I think one thing that we can be sure of is that IoT will be the disruptive technology of the future, and maybe we can even say it is the disruptive technology of the present. And I think what we need to look at also is that some numbers. I think it would be important to know how many more what is the number of installed devices around the world, and how will that increase? For instance, we could say that currently we have probably over 40 million devices installed, billion devices installed worldwide. And in 2025, we will have probably over 75 billion devices. That means that we will have to look more into how can we better properly secure those devices. And when I look at the trends and from an AI ethics perspective, I'm really interested in what kind of security standards are out there. And I think in the future, we will need a global IoT security standard. Maybe there will be a trend towards having more regulations or more standards in place that are globally accepted. And also when we look at the trends, I think when we look at the current pandemic, we can see that there has been a rapid adoption of medical IoT technologies. So I can see that in the future, this will be something that will be even further explored. Like, for instance, having remote patient monitoring or medical robots to work more on expanding on those ideas. Additionally, I think also something that Tejumade touched upon is that we will have more artificial intelligence of things. So artificial intelligence technologies that are combined with IoT in order to have human to machine or machine to machine data flows in real time. So I can see that this will be a development that will be heavily invested in, as this will help to have combined data collection and connected sensors in real time. What else? I think another final point I want to make is you can see that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been a lot of developments in terms of the wearable tech that is out there. So I can see that we will have more adoption of smart homes and smart cities, that those will become more commonplace. And you can see already the popularity of these fitness wearable tech devices, that this will be standard in most devices in the future also. We will have a range of health and fitness monitoring apps, maybe even apps that can help monitor the emotional state of a person. There have been developments in AI to better monitor emotional health. So to have the combination of physical and emotional health, I can see that also being something that could be heavily influencing the future of IoT.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more that we commodify IoT, the more we anthropomorphize it. And if you can sense someone's emotions based on the science of their anatomy, like if someone's heart rate gets high when they're angry, are we only going to further personify our machines? You know, I mean, where does it end? And is it bad or good? That remains to be seen, but it's fascinating nevertheless. So, I mean, to cover the kind of research side of things, it's a very broad question, but what does research mean to you? Let's start with Tejumade.
Yeah, I'm really glad before I answer that question, I'm glad that you mentioned this anthropomorphism happening, right? And having AI or technology be dual use, and we have the good and the bad. And even now we're extremely seeing cases of AI tools being used in ways in which we do not want it to be used. So we definitely need to come up with policies. We need to rethink the way in which this adoption is happening. They're fascinating for sure, but it's more fascinating for people who are not being oppressed by the tools than for people who are being oppressed by the tools. So we just want to highlight the fact that more work needs to be done in terms of ensuring that these tools actually work for everyone and not just for a selected few. So coming to your question, what does research means to me? For me personally, research is always attempting to find solution to important and often very challenging problems. So it could be from developing tools to help people learn more effectively, or it could be coming up with better metrics to evaluate existing methods, or it could be building local data sets to ensure that we preserve this data sets and preserve the culture and the history. So research is broad, and it's just about finding or attempting to find solutions to important and very challenging problems.
And when you say it's more fascinating to those that are oppressed by that tech, what do you mean? Can you give an example?
So I said technology, this AI tools is much more fascinating to people who are not oppressed. That's what I meant. Like, who are not oppressed.
Misquoted you.
I'm so sorry. I must have made a misspoken. The people who are not oppressed by technologies, it's fascinated to you much more than the people who are oppressed by this technology. So yeah, that's what I mean. Thanks for clarifying that.
No, not at all. I think I misquoted you or misheard you. So apologies. No, I'm fascinated to kind of
so let's
dive
think
into
about
the
like facial recognition, for example. The people who are being watched or surveilled, it's not fascinating to be watched or surveilled. But the people who are using that to, do more policing, it's fascinating to them. They can get their job done quickly. You can just like do some prediction, and then you have that. Or the judges that are using to machine learning tools for recidivism, it's fascinating to them that this can work. But the people who are being unjustly, unfairly discriminated against, it's not fascinating to be discriminated against. You want to do credit card, and then you don't get that because an AI said you're at risk. It's not fascinating to me to be at risk. But so I'm just trying to say that in all of this, it's a two-way thing. As much as we are increasingly trying to make the world better with these tools, we need to pay attention to the many people who are being discriminated against, and how it's being used to negatively impact the society.
Yeah, perfect, exactly. So yeah, getting an understanding of who is being maybe victimized by these same smart solutions that we're offering. That's fascinating and completely horrible and needs to be looked into. Okay, brilliant. And Aishatu, I mean, what about you?
I think the term research is so broad, it means different things to different people. For me, when I think of research, it can be applied in so many different ways in our daily life, from our quest of customer knowledge to writing a PhD thesis to exploring a problem at work. For me, research is a systematic process of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting information in order to better understand a phenomenon or something to illuminate a problem that you're interested in or concerned about. So basically, most of the time when people hear research, they think it has something to do with academia or that it is located in academia. But as you know, when you have a company, you have a research and development department that focuses on gathering data and information. So for me, research is a means to an end, which means if for instance, I'm interested in developing technological solutions for peace building, I use research in order to find solution to a specific issue. And then research is just the beginning. So it's really important for me how research is used. How is the research output used? And how is it made accessible in a way that it can be used not only by those who created the information, but also others. So having a research output that is usable, that is for me what makes research really interesting. And having research that reflects diverse methodologies, diverse geographic areas is also really important. For instance, if you look at AI and natural language processing, which is about developing, for instance, Google Translate is an NLP end product. And if you look at Google Translate, you will find that most languages are easily translated. However, many local languages that you find worldwide are not represented. So having research for me means also to include those marginalized communities, to create research and research outputs that serve not only the dominant cultures, but also those who are at the margins. So if we want to have a Google Translate, we should try and expand the data sets so that they have accurate data to also translate Hausa from Northern Nigeria or Swahili, that you can find, like all these languages, they should be represented. So research should be representative, in my opinion.
Yes, and that actually brings me very nicely onto the next question, because both of you have mentioned this. So what can we do to make research more inclusive and more accessible to those, to everybody, but specifically those marginalized communities? If we start with Tejumade, and I know that you have to go around 2:30, so I'll start with you and then you can leave if you need to.
Thank you. And Aishatu, that was brilliant. And I agree with everything you said about that, how research should be representative, how the output should be useful and usable, and perhaps knowledge should also be able to transfer. You should be able to reuse and retransfer that. So I would say that in terms of supporting researchers, I'll talk from the academic perspective because that's what I know best. So it would be supporting researchers, say, in the developing world in terms of like grant, providing grants, more grants. I've seen that's being done increasingly in the past year, but there's still a lot more to do. There's a lot of researchers out there doing different research, which are possibly not as fancy as some places in the developed continent, for example, but they need support. They need grants. So having that is important. And also say that developing a healthier mindset to research in terms of the research output that we have should be highly representative, and we should also have problems, not just problems that are related to theory, should be what is considered as good research, but just collecting data in itself is very hard. A lot of the problems that we face in the developing world, like I do commend researchers in the developing continent because it's a very difficult space to work in, and so we need to ensure that a lot of those work are being recognized, and in terms of like supporting research in that area, making it I want to use the word that I don't want to use, making it attractive for people to want to work on such problem. I think that's the word I'm looking for. And also maybe another thing we can do in terms of representation would be getting some of these conferences to be held on the continent, like developing, like take it out of the developed continent. I know there's a lot of things to consider, but it's not impossible. It shows commitment, and having more diverse people in those conferences, the more diverse work. There's a lot to do in those areas. Again, I'm talking from the academic perspective because these are some of the recurring problems that we see, and it would be nice to address those. That would go a long way in supporting research and making it more inclusive.
Yeah, I think that you've addressed some yeah, very, very serious points there. So making people feel encouraged and included, just in terms of, I guess, the language that you use and the media that you put out, giving them the financial resources and the physical resources to actually get the job done. And also, I think you made a really good point there about geographical location. Why did things have to be Eurocentric or in a, in a specific place? I think I want to say you can't lead a horse to water, but that's not the right proverb, but I know exactly what you mean. So let me know when you need to go. Is it 2:30? Okay, no worries. Well, so we'll let you go, but thank you so much for coming on.
Drop off after Aisha to give our response. I'm really curious as to what she has to say about that.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think this question that you asked, Jessie, is one of the most important questions, really. How can we make it inclusive? How can we make it more accessible? First of all, when I can speak from an AI perspective, one of the biggest challenges that AI is facing right now is biases within AI systems. And when I speak about diversity, I don't only mean whether we have Indigenous or African or Chinese people involved, but also we have to look at gender diversity as well. How many women are involved? How many men? How many other genders are involved in the design process, right? So when I look at this, how can we make it more accessible? You remember I mentioned before, what's really important is how do you present the output of the research? So how can you make it attractive, as Tejumade said? I think here is something that I think we need to rely on more, and that is to use more storytelling methods, arts-based methods, to make things more accessible. So as you know, narrative formats of communication can be very useful for when communicating science outputs to the general audience. So narratives increase comprehension, interest, engagement. So why not use art to explain complex problem within technology? Why not spark discussion and dialogue through something visual? And why should we only rely on scientific journal articles to understand what's going on? They're not always accessible to everyone because of the jargon and the language. And not everyone has the time to read 30 pages of an analysis. So I find that it's really important that we use storytelling methods to explain what it means to live with data these days, for people to really understand what does it mean to live with data. How can we imagine a better future? So actually even writing actual short stories could be something that we could look into. I was involved in a workshop that was organized by Data and Society. And they did a call and asked several people to hand in short stories that explain what it means to live with data from a global South perspective. And I felt that was like the very first attempt that I've seen to explain what living with data from a global South perspective means, and to show parables, stories that show almost something that you can learn from. So you read a story, it's engaging, but at the same time, it incorporates knowledge and research in bite-sized, accessible manner. So how can we increase diversity also? Like Tejumade said, you're doing already a really good job by inviting a diverse group of people in this conference. That's the first step. We need to have better representation in conferences. We need to champion research that looks into critical approaches to IoT. We need to develop devices for IoT that can be used for people who don't speak English, French, or Spanish. So how can we make this happen? By having research that focuses also on those needs. So I would say that, storytelling methodologies, the arts, having more diverse teams, and encouraging especially women to participate more in that area. As you know, we have the Alexas and Siris. Their name already shows these are female names of devices that have that are slightly problematic if you think about how we interact with them. So we need to develop devices that are not only like female chatbots, but maybe a gender neutral chatbot, or one that has a gender neutral voice, or maybe we need to use these devices differently. So I think we need more diverse voices in order to see new ways that we can use technology.
Wow, I mean, there's so much to address there. That's yeah, a huge roster of points, but I totally agree, and I've never thought about why we impose gender on AI before. So I mean, that's fascinating. So I mean, I think there's questions queuing up in the QA now. So I mean, we have one more kind of one more question that I'm going to ask, and then we'll open the floor to the Q&A. So I think Aishatu already just mentioned it, but we've kind of covered the importance of welcoming female and non-binary people into the IoT sphere. So can you explain the importance? I mean, we hopefully don't need to explain it too much, but I mean, what is the importance, and why is it so integral to have female mentors within research in IoT?
I think this is really a really important question. There are many women who are interested in this field, but they feel like because they're not represented, maybe it's not for them. So we need role models that can pave the way, that can mentor and guide women into not falling into this kind of imposter syndrome, right? Feeling like, do I really belong here? Yes. If you think you belong here, you do. And for instance, in my journey, I had a really great mentor. After I participated in this hackathon, Sudha Jamte contacted me, and she was really interested in what I was doing. And she was a huge mentor in my journey, always being available to hear about my ideas and always encouraging me. And also seeing how she is creating opportunities for others. And this is also why I'm really passionate about working or participating in the Black Women in Artificial Intelligence, because that's really about showing that we are here, we exist, and to, in order to see that something is possible, you need to see someone else doing it. So this conference and what you're setting up here is a really good place for networking, for exchanging ideas in a safe space, so that you can feel capable to explore different ideas. For instance, I participated in the Women in AI Accelerator program last year. And it was such a good experience because you were a small group of women learning over the course of several weeks how they can build up a business that focuses on AI. And you were matched with mentors, and you had these kind of lightning talks, hearing about other people's journey. So I think it's really important that we continue to have these kind of conferences or workshops or talks that show the career pivot of women who maybe started their journey doing something else entirely and then ended up doing technology. And we need women in tech because if you look at the example I gave you with biased technology like Alexa, if a woman had been maybe involved in developing these kind of technologies, we would have developed these kind of chatbots maybe with a feminist perspective. What would that look like? You know, how would such an AI respond to requests? And how would we also learn to interact with it? So I think these questions are really important because also many non-binary people are not even represented in data sets. So we need to change that. We need the representation so that we can develop solutions that don't cause harm unintentionally, and that can feel everybody included.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's so interesting as well to explore, because they're quite subtle sometimes, those biases in technology. There's a lot of good literature about all of that, and I'm now failing to think of any of it. But yeah, there's some really interesting literature written on all of those kind of biases in smart tech. So yeah, I mean, thank you for covering that really well. I think now is a good time to open the floor to the Q&A. So I have the questions here. Let me get some up. Here we go. So the first one is going to be, the first question, it's going to be a long journey to get AI to be fully inclusive. What does good look like? What is the utopia for AI? How can we get there quicker? And are there any quick wins?
These are very interesting questions.
Arguably 100 questions in one.
I'm trying to unpack here. So it's going to be a long journey to get AI to be fully inclusive. Yes. I don't think we can ever fully develop AI technologies without bias, but we should try our best to minimize it. There are things we can do to ensure that technology doesn't harm. So I think we need to be able to have these safeguards in place. And the question about what does good look like, I don't really like the word good or bad, because it means kind of we're putting standards also on a technology or on something. And whose standards are we talking about? That's the question I always ask, you know, whose ethics, whose standards? What is good for a Eurocentric society might not be good for an African or Asian society. So we need to first ask ourselves, what do we mean by good and bad? Whose good and bad are we talking about? And yeah, how can we get there quicker? Quicker is not always better. So I think we first have to acknowledge that the AI or technology that we're developing right now is not perfect, and that we need to maybe incorporate these kind of post-colonial ideas about incorporating more diverse teams, having incorporating ethical or responsible guidelines into the whole design process. I think that will be important, to not only have technologists or programmers involved in developing these devices, but to maybe also have ethicists, to have different kind of backgrounds represented professionally, in order to have different voices raising different questions that can help to develop something that is the most inclusive as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we should be wary of being told that we are at the stage where it's an AI utopia, because as you say, that means different things for different people. So it's about reaching a kind of unanimous utopia. So next question would be, what companies that you can think of are leading the way in this area? And by this area, I presume in the research area and potentially in kind of the equality and diversity area.
This is a really difficult question. I feel like what I've been seeing right now is that many companies are at the moment at a stage of acknowledging that they need more diversity.